banking system afloat. After an urgent cabinet meeting in Dublin, the Irish Prime Minister Brian Cowan said the EU had agreed to assist and that formal negotiations were now underway. For weeks, his government had been maintaining that a bailout wasn't needed, despite increasing evidence of investors pulling out. First tonight, let's join Joe Lynam in Dublin. Joe.
Yeah, good evening. And as you join me, it's a developing situation. What had been a very dramatic day has become even more dramatic. You can see the ambulance behind me here. That is taking a protester away from the scene in front of government buildings. As the ministerial cars were leaving after the cabinet meeting, a ministerial car hit a protester and ran over a protester. That is the extent of the passion that has gone on over here. There's quite an amount of shouting and roaring at ministers as they were leaving the building, and it's added to the sense of frustration and anger that is felt all over this republic as Ireland moves on from denying that they're in talks, moves on that they would ask for money, to asking for money from the IMF. Over the past few months, €23 billion in capital has flown out of Ireland and its enfeebled banks as large investors fear for the future. It was that flight of money which forced the government's hand.
Minister, quick word.
So cabinet ministers going into one of the most important meetings since the foundation of the state got to hear their leader finally admit that the country would indeed be asking for a bailout.
I can confirm that the government has today decided that Ireland apply for financial assistance to the European Union. The request of the government was transmitted to the European authorities this evening. The European authorities have agreed to our request. A formal process of negotiation will now commence that will lead to the provision of assistance on the basis of a programme to be negotiated by the government with the European Commission and the International Monetary Fund in liaison with the European Central Bank.
So how much will Ireland be looking for? Well, the Irish Finance Minister said that there was a €19 billion shortfall in day-to-day government spending which needed to be funded. But he was less clear on how much money Ireland's shattered banks would need, but it is believed to be in the order of tens of billions of euros. For one Irishman, this week's events were simply too much. After standing in front of a ministerial car, he was arrested for public order offences, though he wouldn't go quietly.
Stop harassing me! Stop harassing me!
And the message to the government from Ireland's best-selling broadsheet was clear. You lied, now go.
It is a dark day and very deeply disappointing for me as an Irishman, for my party and for my people and the people of the country. I believe that this government has brought us to this point through failures to tell the truth over the last week and failures to bring in policies that were realistic, and we are here today because of that failure.
IMF out! This is our country!
After 90 years of independence, many here feel that today's announcement humiliatingly hands sovereignty, albeit financial, to others. And Irish taxpayers are bracing themselves for another swinging budget in the coming weeks that is expected to see some major social welfare cuts and tax rises as the government attempts to get the public finances back in order. But one gets a sense today that the anger is very palpable and is only going to rise in the coming weeks, months and possibly years.
Joe, thank you. Joe Lynam there in Dublin. Well, I'm joined now by our business editor, Robert Peston, who's here with me in the studio, and by our Europe editor, Gavin Hewitt, who joins us live from Lisbon. Gavin, what do you think the Irish move means for the future of the Eurozone?
Well, there was a real sense of urgency as the Eurozone's finance ministers held a conference call trying to agree as much as they could before the markets opened tomorrow. The European Central Bank said this was all about safeguarding the financial stability both of the euro and also of the Eurozone. And the German finance minister said this was not about defending one country, namely Ireland, it was about defending a common currency. What was driving all of this? The fear of contagion, that Ireland's problems could spread to other weaker Eurozone countries like Portugal, where I am at the moment, force up their borrowing costs and perhaps also force them down the road towards a bailout. But I think the big question tonight is this. This is the second bailout of a Eurozone country in the past 12 months. Will tonight this draw a kind of line under things, or actually will there be further instability in the future, perhaps further bailouts, therefore putting in question the long-term viability of the single currency? Mishal.
Robert, those are the implications then for the Eurozone. What about for us here in the UK?
Yes, I mean, I think we've got to say us in two senses, both the UK and the wider world. In the UK, the Irish economy is terribly important to the British economy. It may not be a huge economy, but we export a substantial amount to Ireland. Irish banks play a big role in Northern Ireland. Royal Bank of Scotland, one of our very biggest banks, has lent £53 billion into Northern Ireland. That's a semi-nationalised bank. We own about 80% of it. And what's more, we as taxpayers are insuring a lot of those loans. So if the Irish economy were to implode, that would generate big losses for the Royal Bank of Scotland, big losses for taxpayers. And that's why George Osborne is participating as Chancellor of the Exchequer in this rescue. He's participating indirectly through the IMF. He's participating indirectly through something called the European Financial Stability Mechanism, which is providing money. And there will be a bilateral loan from the UK to Ireland, almost certainly. That's what's being negotiated. Wider than that, Ireland's banks are huge players in international markets. That is the weakness of Ireland. It's their banks. If they were to go down, the ripples through the financial system would be extremely serious for all of us.
Robert Peston, thank you very much indeed, and thanks also to Gavin Hewitt, our Europe editor, who's in Lisbon tonight.